So neuromarketing is just essentially the use of neuroscience and marketing to enhance consumer experience and also influence consumer behavior. They had done a massive EEG study on understanding what was the result of certain color use and also placement.
Yeah.
And that's how they were able to have a very informed decision on how the marketing campaign should run.
Right.
How to get extra activation in the prefrontal cortex, how to get more activation in the amygdala. And these are the two primary brain areas which are associated to improved activity. So if you have high activation there, that means what you're doing is good. A scenario would be if you were given a black box versus a pink box, your brain activity would be different for each of them, and an fMRI just picks up on how high the activity is for each area.
Nokhez, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
How's
How
it going?
are you?
Good, fine. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Below the Fold, episode 7.
I'm super excited.
I'm very excited about this one.
Yeah.
This,
It's quite different from what I usually do. I do a lot of like neuro health work, so doing something in neuromarketing is always really exciting. And I'm very geeky about everything neuro, so I'm very excited to just be like, here are these facts and insights, and we have so much to tell you.
yeah, it's very different also from what I'm usually doing. I'm usually covering more like marketing specific, topics or the traditional marketing specific topics. And today is going to be somehow about marketing, but maybe a little bit different. I'm very excited about this one because it's that specific, and I think it's a subject that we don't really speak about too much in marketing, or at least in traditional marketing.
I think it's also very novel.
Yeah.
I think even in the West, where a lot of the research for this is being done, it's still like a new emerging science, and it's a new emerging practice as well. To bring it to the region is even more exciting because we're going to test out with different kind of perspectives and cultures.
Right.
So for me, as someone who's a little bit more in the research and the science part of it, I'm just really excited to see what we're going to see in the region and how to slowly start bringing in that neuroscientific perspective into the region here. So
Amazing. Yeah, I'm really excited to unpack neuromarketing.
yeah.
I'm not sure if we mentioned it from the beginning, but today's episode is about neuromarketing. So let me start with, according to neuroscience research from the past few decades, 95% of decisions are made unconsciously.
Yeah. Lots of our decision making is actually done through the primitive analysis that we do visually. So whether it be color, tone, placement, texture, these things unconsciously inform us about our decision making, and through that we kind of make a decision tree mentally. And this is still from like a unconscious to a subconscious basis, where we're making a decision tree of what we want to do. And then there's like the sudden click that it becomes like a very conscious decision of, okay, this is what I want. And emotions tend to play the bigger part in this whole, it's like a mediating role in when something becomes from like a choice to an option to a choice.
Right. I read somewhere, or I heard somewhere, that without emotions we can't make any decisions.
Yeah. And I think it's in science, we always think that, not just in science, but everyone thinks that humans are very people are very logical, we make very logical decisions. But because emotions play such a big part in our decision making, we're not as logical or as rational as we think we are. We make a lot of illogical and irrational decisions because of the way emotions play in part. And this is why I feel like now neuromarketing has become a bigger aspect in considering what marketing should look like in the future, because we have more information as to how people perceive more visual information or non-text information to inform their decisions.
Right. I think just before we get into the details, just to simplify to our audience, listeners, viewers, one example, I suppose, or practice of neuromarketing is one that I read about recently. The ads on Google search results, they're blue.
Yeah.
Right? And it turns out that Google tested out 40 different shades of blue to see which one will generate most clicks or click-throughs. And once they've identified which shade, that increased revenue by 200 million plus.
Yeah. And the neuro behind that is that there are specific shades of blue that elicit positive emotions. So if they're able to get the right positive emotion going, and whether that positive emotion is associated to trust, to positivity, to security, they're more likely to press and actually engage with the said content. So you like even in the past, it's not just Google, but also Campbell Soups, for example. They have the very traditional Campbell can for the advertisement, but they had a little bit of a glass ceiling effect where they saw that not a lot of people were actually engaging with the Campbell soup anymore. And they had run a couple of tests on actually looking at which color elicits the most positive information. Sorry, not just information, but positive emotions. And they saw that there was certain shades of red and blue that got people feeling more like attracted to the content. They felt like they were more interested in what it was, and they felt more almost hungry. It's why McDonald's, KFC, and all these like big fast food chains have red in there. A very specific tone of red that too in their branding to elicit hunger. So a lot of our colors and how we place certain things play with our emotions to get us going, so to speak.
It's that specific, huh? It's down to different shades.
I mean, it's like in supermarkets. How you walk through a supermarket, it biases your decision making. So when you enter a supermarket, you always have the healthy stuff first. You have the breads, the fresh fruits, the veggies, and you've got maybe like meat in the back. And right towards the end where you have to like leave the store, there's like the candy aisle, and you have the last like little chocolates here and there. And it's because this by a decision and this is too unconsciously, you're like, okay, I've gotten all my healthy stuff in order, but like one chocolate wouldn't hurt, one last sweet wouldn't hurt. And it's because it's also by metrics such a small element in the whole thing that it seems almost like negligible to the decision making. Otherwise, imagine if you walked in with a store where like the sweets were put first, you would skip it because you're like, okay, where's the fresh fruit at? Or like, where's the healthy stuff at? So it literally, you can play with decision making.
Yeah, maybe after walking throughout the entire store, you need a bit of sugar
yeah,
at the end.
Especially if you go to the big Carrefour here.
Right, it makes sense. Awesome, wonderful. So why do you think we could use neuromarketing for, or what would be the goals of using neuromarketing? Would it be to make the experience a little bit more seamless for the end user, or?
I think before going into like the specific application, just defining also what neuromarketing is would help people understand where and how to use neuromarketing. So neuromarketing is just essentially the use of neuroscience and marketing to enhance consumer experience and also influence consumer behavior. Enhancing, influencing becomes slightly different because when you speak about enhancing, it's about improving the overall experience, making them feel more at ease, or just like making it a more pleasurable experience. But influencing means making people decide one option over the other just because it's almost put together the right way. It's like how, it's how packaging is done. Like if something's packaged more pretty, you're more likely to pick that package over maybe a less pretty package. So it's about not toying, but like influencing the behavior. And when it comes to the application of neuromarketing, it's overall, we've seen it across 3 different fronts. We've seen it in product design and advertisements, but it's also coming down to websites, landing pages, just getting the initial input as well. And for example, Hyundai, when they were testing out different models for their car and the prototypes, they actually ran a couple of studies on how people were perceiving the models before they finalized their product. And when you're able to engage with human neuroprocessing, so this could be through EEG analysis or through other neuroimaging analysis. And you also have the non-traditional ones like skin conduction. So skin conduction will give you other metrics, but Hyundai specifically used EEG analysis to understand, and they found that there was a specific kind of neuroactivity associated to calmness to certain kind of models, and there was more positivity for certain models over other models. And this is how they were able to finalize the design, and they also saw that the users wanted that model as well. They saw more revenue and purchases for that model, and this is how I see a lot of these big brands utilizing neuromarketing to actually further influence how they design their product, finalize it, and put it out in the market. And besides that, there's obviously the day-to-day ads. If you are using the right colors, the right tones, and we've seen it already nowadays on Instagram, a lot of the beats per minute are they're reflected with how the video is going to run through. They're going to have that many frame changes in the video, and it kind of perceptually matches and makes you feel more excited, and it gets your attention, and those videos perform significantly better than just very seamless, boring chit-chat videos nowadays. And we've seen that over time, but this is mostly for traditional advertisements, so like product placement or product advertisement. And I think lastly, it's just to also make advertisements further more, what's it called? Just to enhance advertisements. The same.
More compelling and engaging. Yeah.
That's an example of Campbell, for example. They had the advertisement in place, but they wanted it to be they wanted to give it a little oomph factor. So that's what they did.
Right. Are we able to identify what are these different parameters that I guess marketeers could use in your marketing? Is it just color? What else is there? Sound synced with video? Is it also shapes maybe?
Shapes, not always. I mean, like with Apple's, even with the iPhone, they've changed their shape ever so slightly every time. It's gone from very soft round edges to now slightly more thicker and like squarish and edgy edges.
Yeah.
So it's more like over time. It's not a specific shape, but more maybe of the softness of the shape, the roundness, there's the harshness.
Texture.
Yeah, the harshness of it,
Right,
because they've noticed people don't want anything harsh. Even, and I think there was another one, what's it called? I don't remember what exact ad it was and who was running the study, but it was that they did a bit of an A/B testing program on packaging, and they saw that people hated the glossy plastic packaging and they preferred the matte packaging because it elicited more of this emotion of royalty and like it's like upper class and luxury. So people were end up buying that product a lot more. So it's something as simple as that, and just the texture made the difference in their consumer behavior because they realized people just felt nicer with one over the other. So there's definitely texture, a little bit of shapes, colors is an obvious one.
Yeah.
Smell as well.
Smell, right?
Yeah.
For
Smell,
products.
definitely.
Yeah.
There was a study they did with old books and new books. People prefer the smell of old books. They will always prefer a smell of an old book, no matter how thin or like almost poor in quality it is, over like a hardcover book. They still prefer the old smell of a book because it's very classic to how some people may feel. I mean, this is for maybe not the current generation who's kind of stuck with their iPads, but like the older generations definitely did prefer the smell of an old book and going to the library.
And words, maybe, no? Words, copies, words used in advertising.
I mean, I think when it comes to words, it's also the sequence of words. And with the words, it's also how you package it with the colors and the sound and everything else. If you're using, and especially in this culture, if you're using words that don't resonate with the people, the ad will never stick. No matter how pretty the background is or how visually informative the background might be, if the words are not in the right sequence and they're not conveying the right message, you lose essential trust. And trust is the big part of marketing. Marketing essentially is getting the person to actually get interested in the product and then to eventually buy it. And this obviously affects sales, but a lot of that aspect of sales comes from trust. So if you lose the consumer trust from the get-go, forget the sales aspect.
Yeah.
So
you lose a customer.
Exactly. You use a customer and then probably never will come back because they'll have that perception of the bias from the get-go, like, oh, whatever.
Right. Yeah. And these change, I think, across time. Taste, I guess, can we call it taste from an end user perspective?
Yeah.
Of what triggers their emotions or what influences their emotions.
Consistent. It doesn't change.
Is it consistent though across generations?
Would you say,
would you say, for example, a brand at some point, if it's hitting the nail for a certain generation or it's at a certain point in time, with the right colors, sound, smell, and other things,
all right? The ABCs of neuroscience.
All the ABCs, but maybe after 20 years, it needs to change a little bit because those change.
I think there was the case with Pepsi.
Yeah.
They had the very traditional logo for the longest time and then they changed it. And they did see that a lot of the original customers just did not like the change. Like even till this day, I mean, I'm not going to say like I've been around since Pepsi was around, but it's like, even for me, that change in logo was a bit disgrunting. It's like, okay, but now I'm not like, why the hell would you change it? So you lose trust if the change is too drastic.
Yeah.
Coca-Cola, on the other hand, has been able to keep their branding very, very consistent. And when you have that level of consistency, it obviously helps brand reputation, but overall also becomes very recognizable and people just trust the consistency aspect. Consistency and trust differ obviously across cultures. The way the West also processes trust is significantly different from the East. So for us, it's more like consistency and also word of mouth. Mm-hmm. So if I know that someone else has liked it, it's more likely for me to like it as well. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the West, they're more individual in their decision making. Yeah. So it's like they don't really care what other people think, but for us, it's like, okay, it's kind of like a passed down information for us.
Right. And on the other hand, you do see brands do change their logo and,
Twitter is
very
a great
successful
one.
at it. Huh?
Twitter is a great example.
Twitter is a great example. Yeah, I mean, Twitter had a complete
that makeover.
Makeover completely. Even the name changed.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Do you think it was?
I'm not a big fan.
Not a big fan.
Yeah, because I still call it Twitter.
Yeah.
You see, like for me,
it's hard
Twitter.
to let go, right? Of Twitter. Yeah.
And it's like when you've created that brand and identity, to change it without any real need is like for the end user, it's a little disconnected. Whereas if they had done some neuromarketing and analysis and understood that people would not really like it, perhaps Elon would have thought twice about the change,
Yeah, perhaps he should have listened to you. Or he should hire you. I mean,
please hire me.
You're right. Where did X come from? X.
Yeah.
But it's also there's no story behind it.
And there's usually, and I know in marketing it's a lot of storytelling, and when it comes to neuromarketing, we're just using brain images and brain information to enhance that storytelling and to make it more appealing for the end user. So for where I sit, I think that the application is wonderful, and I've seen some companies really use it to really enhance their entire product, whether it be from the design to the advertisement to how the advertisement ends up looking like, down to even the experience of the customer buying it now. Yeah. So it's a little bit of the play of understanding that certain brain areas need to be activated to elicit certain emotions, and if those emotions are activated, then you're able to actually have a really seamless journey throughout marketing. And not just marketing, but to get the person to look at the advertisement into buying the product. So It's more like, I want to say neuromarketing is the best thing that ever happened.
Right. It is. I think it's super underrated, honestly.
Yeah. But I think it's not, I don't know if it's underrated, but I think it's also because it's an emerging science. Not like we're still investigating so heavily on understanding decision-making sciences and neuromarketing and its implications in decision making. So bringing, and this is still heavily in the West, bringing that to the East, where we're still on solidifying our own methodology in marketing, introducing something so angular and so almost foreign, is going to take a little bit of time.
Yeah, I mean, maybe perhaps it's being applied when companies are building their brand identities, but they're not really extensively using it when they are building a communication plan or planning a campaign or shooting an advertisement.
Yeah,
right?
And I think this is where also some of them make the mistake.
Yeah.
Neuromarketing is also very expensive. Like getting your hands on an EEG scan and fMRI is even as a neuropsychologist, it's you're lucky to get your hands on that kind of neuroimaging technology. And I think this is where research has helped with just creating that database for us to understand best practices. And this is where I feel like for early branding, it's important to start looking at it at early stages rather than, 20 years down the line and suddenly you're like, oh, let me change this factor about my branding. Because then it's too late because you've also built that image.
What's an EEG scan? Can you just
EEG
break it up
scan.
for us?
It's so our brains are largely communicating with electrical signals, and an EEG scan is just going to pick up the temporal frequency of those. Not temporal frequencies, the electrical impulses and the activity in your brain. Mm-hmm. So it's like a big cap with, I think, up to 32 nodes, and it just picks up the different electrical signals going through.
Okay.
And it will pick up the frequencies over time, whether it be an alpha, beta, or theta frequency.
So they give it to people to wear while they watch advertisement or while they engage with the brand.
Engage with the brand, engage with colors. So with Google and I think it was, keep mixing it up which of the brands it was, but they had done a massive EEG study on understanding what was the result of certain color use and also placement. Yeah. And that's how they were able to have a very informed decision on how the marketing campaign should run.
Right.
So
Okay.
And then there's fMRI, which I'm a bigger fan of.
Okay.
So you pop yourself into a scan.
fMRI,
and then it actually measures the functional activity in your brain.
Right.
So what, a scenario would be if you were given a black box versus a pink box, your brain activity would be different for each of them, and an fMRI just picks up on how high the activity is for each area. Like, does it engage with your prefrontal cortex or with your amygdala, which is associated to emotions? So this is usually what neuromarketers should, or marketeers should look at, is like, where can you get the most activation out of the amygdala, which is associated to reward and interest as well. And maybe less activation, there's this anterior cingulate, which is associated to conflict.
Mm-hmm.
If you have too much conflict activation, you want to stay away from it then. So I know that a lot of people might not be able to do active EEG analysis themselves, but if you're going to look at the research, then look for these two keywords, amygdala and then ACC, and just work around with it then.
So these studies can help understand whether a consumer will like your brand or will like your advertisement.
Because there is research for this. So rather than having to spend so much money on doing your own
focus groups or
exactly, rather than spending so much money on your own focus groups and research, what I would suggest is looking about the research and seeing what are some of the recommendations.
Right.
How to get extra activation in the prefrontal cortex, how to get more activation in the amygdala. And these are the two primary brain areas which are associated to improved activity. So if you have higher activation there, that means what you're doing is good. And if you have higher activity in the ACC, which is a part of your cingulate cortex, you maybe want to steer away from it, because that means there's higher conflict in decision making.
How many people do you need to examine to have
I would say anything above 25 people.
25
because then it becomes a normative, like you want to have like a normal bell curve in statistics. So this is where it's becoming a bit too data sciencey.
Okay.
But it's like you do want to have a group more than 25, just because you want to have more normal scales.
Right. And does it help also understand decision making?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Your neuromarketing will help a little bit in your decision making, because it informs you more about the decision or how to change the decision. So consumer behavior is obviously slightly different from marketing. Consumer behavior is obviously the behavior for a consumer based on the product of what it is, or whatever they're interacting with. And if you're able to enhance their behavior or improve their behavior through neuromarketing, you overall enhance the entire journey.
Yeah.
So this is where it's like you can really use the application of neuromarketing into decision making.
Right. You can help with decision making, but
exactly.
But when it comes to reality, and I know this is a reality too. I'm not saying everything we're saying is surreal, but let's say someone wants to buy a car. Go and looks up different car models, car brands, visits the showrooms, etc. Perhaps some car brands are more successful with the colors, the shapes, the smell of the car inside, all of that. But
even their websites are very it tells you a lot. Like if you go through Porsche's website, it's very seamless, and it gives you like the look and feel of the car before you even buy it.
Yeah.
So that increases your just excitement. You're like, oh my God, I can almost, it feels like you can almost touch it. You're like, oh, I'm almost there.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go to, for example, Jeep's website, it's kind of like you're
rugged.
Yeah, exactly. And it gives you that feel for the product as well. You're like, okay, this is it's a tough car. It's a big car. It's a big box as well. It's a bit rugged.
So all of these elements are gonna, influence, right, your decision.
Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, there are external elements as well, right? There's word of mouth, what your friend who owns a Jeep will tell you about the car.
Yeah, and it's
the context as well. Can you afford it? Can you not afford it? Clearly, someone affords a Porsche here. Has been visiting the Porsche website.
And listen, it's called daydreaming. It's called manifestation.
Right. Yeah.
But even with what's it called? The word of mouth. It's like culture as well.
Yeah.
Dubai culture is very specific, where people do look at Porsche websites, in the middle of the night. They're like, what's a Porsche going to look like for me in a couple of years? Whereas I think in Saudi, when we lived there, largely the idea was what's most economical as well.
Yeah.
And what can drive me from one point to the other through the big annoying roads that they have there.
Yeah.
So it's also, like the experience really informs the consumer's decision at the end of the day.
Yeah, and this is outside of neuromarketing, right?
Yeah.
Now it's like just logic, rational decision making.
Entanglement. There's a little bit like one influences the other. You will always know that you can maybe try the best of the best neuromarketing strategies to inform or to influence a consumer's decision. But if their experience is a lot heavier and there's more of that cultural experience that also weighs into their processes, then your neuromarketing processes and strategies can like take a backseat because the personal experience hinders it.
Yeah.
For example, a very good example is Pepsi and Coca-Cola. There was a study where they had Pepsi and Coca-Cola without any labels on, and people were like, "Oh, like they preferred the taste of Pepsi." But when they were told that, by the way, this is Pepsi and Coca-Cola, almost all of them preferred Coca-Cola just because the emotional connection that they had built with Coca-Cola over time was significantly better than what they had with the taste of Pepsi. So this is where branding, culture, neuromarketing stands out more than just the experience of the product.
Yeah.
Even.
Yeah. So. Agreed.
Plus, Coca-Cola is so much nicer when you're having like mixed grilled or biryani. So I'm like it's also this is where culture and personal experience does weigh in a lot more.
Yeah. Just to reassure our viewers and listeners that neuromarketing is not some magical.
No, I wish
hypnotical method, right, to lure customers to buy a product. There's also the rationale, right?
Yeah.
The logic.
The science behind it.
Yeah, you're not gonna buy a small car, if you wanna cross the desert, right?
Yeah.
Even if the colors are cool, the smell
is good. Even the website is amazing, and like you wish you had it.
It's still ethical. And speaking of ethical, is there anything that is borderline unethical about neuromarketing?
I think there is a lot of debate around the nudge theory and more of the very typical principles in decision making as to like, if we put together the nudge theory, we're not letting the end user really make their own decision. We're kind of biasing the decision making, and the question of is this ethical comes up. And I think when it comes to neuromarketing, it's not that we are changing their decision making. We're enhancing we're enhancing the elements that they need to consider when making their decision. So the valuation, it could go up or down based on how we're putting it together, but we're not necessarily pushing them to make a decision. It's like it's a gray area, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like when I studied a little bit of the nudge theory and applied it for a couple of projects, it was very clear that the nudge theory also means that you are obviously pushing them to make the smarter decision, but they can opt out if necessary and if they are aware of it. But this is where it becomes a little manipulative, so to speak. If the user doesn't know about the other options and they only stick to your options because of the options you've designed for them, then this is where it's like, oh, but you're manipulating them to make a certain decision. And this is where I think the conversation of ethics comes in.
Yeah.
So
I think also depending on whether the product is actually good for you or bad for you, right? Or I guess it would also apply across both scenarios. It doesn't really matter if it's bad for you or good for you. If you're manipulating the user, it's just dead wrong from there, right?
I think that's where the drama starts. Like even like, for example, I mean, this is less neuromarketing, more maybe decision making.
Yeah.
But nudge theory is used often in restaurants for the default method, where by default the milk you get in your coffee would be plant-based. And it's a default. Like whenever you order, you'll get oat milk or soy milk, which is disgusting.
Yeah.
No offense to soy milk drinkers, but it's disgusting.
Yeah.
And people would think that, oh, that's manipulative. I didn't decide that, but you're putting oat or plant-based anyway. But the option is that it's an opt-out. You have to opt out of the default to be able to say, hey, I want that, like, full-fat milk.
Regular. Yeah, natural milk. Even oat milk isn't great, apparently.
Oat milk's great.
According to latest
no, it's very sugary.
Trends.
So yeah, it's very
sugary. No, apparently it has palm oil or some really bad kind of oil in it.
That doesn't sound like oat milk to me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I don't
no.
know what milk you've been, what research you've been studying.
You can try coconut milk.
That's disgusting.
I don't know why oat milk is okay and the rest are not good for you.
It's creamier if you have like a cappuccino with oat milk. But this is consumer experience here. And there's certain brands that will suggest that they're the best in like their type, like Oatly, for example. Their marketing is insane. They've been able to really personalize the product to such a point that they have a high calcium Oatly. They have a normal Oatly. They have barista Oatly. And even their packaging and branding is so cute. Cute is a subjective experience, clearly. But because of their branding, they've been able to inform the user in a way that they have built that relationship with me over time. Like, I'm a loyal customer because I'm like, they've done this. They have all these different options. It tastes great. They have a barista option.
Yeah.
So this is where it's like, obviously I have a preference for Oatly because of it.
Yeah,
so.
I agree. Their packaging is pretty neat.
Yeah. And it's also very characteristic to the kind of population they're serving to. Gen Zs prefer that kind of packaging compared to like Almarai, for example, which for my parents is like the go-to. Like, there's no question asked around Almarai because that's what we grew up with in the region. It's what we have built in trust with. For my parents, Oatly, it's a little bit like, this is foreign. We don't know what chemicals they put in there.
Yeah.
So this is where you see that sort of play of trust versus marketing and newer looks. And almost which audience is a little bit more influential over the other.
Yeah, I think Al-Marai has done also a great job in reinforcing that quality matters to them, right, throughout the years. Yeah. They've done an absolutely good job. And they're very consistent in the quality.
Like, I know that the chocolate bottles, the chocolate milk bottles have been the same exact design since 2008. So we were in Saudi and it was the same goddamn bottle and it's the same bottle now. So that consistency has built that relationship with the end user where they just like, it's also visual. Like, you don't even have to think about it being Almarai and you just pick up the bottle whilst you're walking around the store. So that's how they've been able to build trust over time. Now, if Almarai changed their look, a lot of the loyal consumers will be like, wait, I can't find the bottle anymore.
Yeah.
And that's where they will lose out on a lot of customers.
The brand is engraved within their
engraved
minds.
in the culture.
in a very good way. And to be fair, their products are pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about behavior economics and marketing. Ooh. I know that we've listed down this topic here. And I don't want to skip it. I do want to touch on it because you told me you're excited about it as well.
I'm excited about anything neuroscience.
So fantastic. So let's talk about this. What is this form of marketing? Can you explain us?
Consumer behavior marketing is understanding psychological factors and how they will influence decision making for an individual. So this would be the cognitive biases, heuristics. Heuristics is just like how to quicken up that decision-making process rather than having the person go down through the pathway of having to be like, oh, would I like this or X and Y and Z? And this is where Kahneman's theory of the fast and slow kicks in, where you want to actually activate the fast thinking processes rather than have them be in the deliberation for too long.
Can you give an example, because this is interesting?
So let me think.
The context needs to be there, right? First of all, like
not
you said,
always. Yeah, not always, because if you are able to put it in together the right consumer behavioral techniques, the right kind of decision-making biases as well, and almost maybe in some cases de-bias it and make it more personalized and subjective to an individual, then you're able to also improve the overall experience. And over time, if you have that built-in trust from the get-go, over time, that trust stays consistent for them because they feel like it's catered to their experience. Starbucks is a very interesting example because they were able to just do something as simple as write your name on the cup, and people loved that experience. It made them feel like, oh, the brand knows me now. It changed their entire consumer behavior around the brand because they felt like it was more personal for them. Even though there was no big decision change in there or any manipulation and strategy, all they did was add a goddamn name.
Yeah.
Right. And since then, people feel more personalized and people started posting all over social media. So that allowed the brand to grow really quickly because
Yeah.
it was like everyone wanted to get their names written on a plastic cup.
Yeah.
So-
That's why packaging is so important, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah.
Packaging, but also that final consumer behavior. The coffee's not, it's nice, but it's not my favorite coffee, you know?
Yeah.
But even with that, like putting that aside, people still loved getting their names written.
Yeah.
So that made it a quick decision for them rather than a deliberation. Whereas you can really see some people deliberate over certain coffee brands because of the price.
Yeah.
Starbucks is as expensive as maybe Arabica, maybe.
Arabica?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Maybe
think so.
it's
Honestly,
almost.
I don't drink Starbucks for good reasons.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
don't drink Starbucks anymore. But it was also like now, if you do the comparison of pricing, this is where the decision making gets changed because
Yeah.
of that personalized experience for Starbucks. They're more likely to pay that price because they're like, oh, I get good coffee plus I get my name written on a cup. So it's an easier decision for them to make versus regular coffee with no name. Even if it's a good coffee, they're not going to end up buying or purchasing that just because there's no added value in the personalization aspect. So this is where Starbucks has maybe showed us how personalization can give you that extra edge.
Yeah, yeah. It can go a little further.
Yeah, we can definitely go a lot further.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Arabica is good coffee too.
it's the best.
Yeah. I don't know how far their marketing goes.
But they have a specific style, and that's because, and you know, if you go to Kuwait or other countries, it's a clear branding. I mean, it's also good coffee. So
Yeah,
for me,
I think it's really good coffee. This is what's really helping them.
Yeah, it's good coffee, and they're also very true to themselves. It's not like a marketing gimmick, because there's a slight difference where it's like you've done something that allows you to naturally and organically grow, but then there's a marketing gimmick that just becomes explosive, and they've stayed away from that. And I think that's also touched points with certain kinds of consumers. Obviously, there's like different personalities in consumers. There's the more influencer kind of consumers, and you have ones that just really enjoy good coffee and are there for the essential buy in itself. And this is where neuromarketing and decision-making biases can influence how each of the individual behaves.
And the experience is pretty neat also for Arabica. When you go to their store, it's pretty tidy, pretty high-end, just like their coffee,
exactly.
right?
It feels more luxurious versus like, oh, I'm just going to go get my Starby and like walk out.
Starby, that's a new one.
There are also some other forms of consumer decision-making marketing, such as anchoring. Putting better, like, and this is commonly seen in stores. If you go to any shelf in the store, it's also where the product is placed, and that anchors you a little bit. So their best, like the best sellers will always be at eye level, and that anchors your decision making. Whereas the more cheaper and the less likely to be bought items are kind of at the bottom.
At the bottom, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And usually we'll see college students are always lurking at the bottom.
Why?
College students, you know, we're all in a budget.
Oh, because of the budget, because of the
and
the price point. Yeah.
And this is where anchoring is like whatever. It's because the decision making is completely biased for them on the price.
Right. Yeah. Okay. What else is there, Nokhez?
What else is there? There's obviously social proof and decision making. And a very clear example is how people will buy hair from Noon. People like buying items from Noon over Amazon sometimes. And this is a regional thing because it's a social factor for us. Like, okay, this person has used it, they had a great experience, and their item was able to be delivered in 1 hour. I want that too. That's social proof for them that it works, and then they do the exact same action. So in a culture where there's a lot more collectivism and there's a lot more of that social engagement and closeness, you will always see social proof do a lot more. And this is where you'll recognize that certain brands utilize social proof to push their narrative forward. And they've done really, really well as well over time.
Yeah.
So.
And does AI and tech have a role to play in these behavioral marketing strategies?
AI.
We have to touch on AI. I mean,
everyone's talking
nowadays.
about AI. I think AI has allowed for hyper personalization now. Having that kind of data and that amount, and just that the size of the data has allowed so many of the bigger brands to be able to understand what their consumers really like, and using the data to further become more hyper personal. I know that, for example, there is a startup that I'm quite familiar with, a biolab from Shilhoop Group. What they've been able to do is they had a large amount of consumers come in. They started seeing some trends, and they've been able to use that to sort of further specialize and hyper personalize that experience for the end user. And personalization is what people really enjoy nowadays. It's a form of luxury to feel like you've been catered to. Even though a biolab hasn't started using AI, it's when you have significantly larger organizations have that kind of data, but also the money to be able to run algorithms and process that data for hyper personalization. And Netflix is a great example for this. They understand each of their individual consumers really, really well, because they've been able to understand the behavior of each consumer and then run an algorithm. And this is also how it gives you suggestions over time. Instagram is a perfect example for that as well, where they've been able to recognize that certain users will behave in a certain way, and because of that behavior, they will be suggested more content like that. Like recently, I've been interacting with a lot of food content, and that has further pushed that forward. The algorithm.
Cool. I wanted to, before we wrap up, just cover one more point on neuromarketing. What do you think are nuances for the region here when it comes to neuromarketing? Like you said earlier, the blue isn't perceived the same way here as opposed to abroad.
I think when it comes to the nuances for the region, social proof is obviously one tactic that needs to be further utilized on the decision-making scheme. And when it comes to specific neuromarketing, I think there needs to be a little bit more investigation put in place in terms of research and understanding the brain areas that are associated to certain emotions, because obviously currently a lot of the large data that we have on neuromarketing is Western-based. We need to have the Middle Eastern base to actually be able to make our assumptions. But some key notions or key elements that we can already start considering is color. Color has always been studied quite grandly throughout the last few decades, so there is enough data on how to utilize color. And also smell. Smell and taste, as the Middle Easterns and South Asians, we love our smells. We love the oud, perfumes, bakhur. There's so much already around the general behavior that we can use general behavior to sort of extrapolate what some of the more specific neuromarketing tactics we can pull through.
Okay. So should I spray oud all over my product?
I mean, a good example is Dubai Hills Mall. If you walk through the mall smells great. It smells really nice. People want to go to a mall that smells nice.
But wait, hold on. Shouldn't all malls smell nice?
I mean, there's some malls that, it's not they smell bad, but Dubai Hills Mall smells better. You see?
Okay.
So the experience there is just slightly nicer.
But I mean, is this a regional, cultural?
Would be regional and cultural. Because the smell of the mall is specific to the regional culture, I would say. It has more of a, I don't want to say oudi or like an Arab smell, but it's very like, I don't know. It smells nice.
I think it's the oud smell particularly, because I imagine maybe Americans in the US would, prefer malls that smell better.
No, but I think everyone wants to go to a nice smelling mall. But I think it's over there, neutral smells and more of the clean smell is preferred, whereas here, because it's a little perfumey, it just smells a lot nicer. And by perfumey, I mean like it has a fragrance to it, rather than just a very clean, neutral smell. And this is how you already see there's a preference just locally already between which mall is better than the other. So,
right. Okay. And I think there's the local geographical nuance, and there's also the generational nuance.
Yes, there's definitely generational nuance.
Millennials versus Gen Zs.
Of course, there's always the debate. But I think even when it comes to Gen Zs, the information load for them is always going to be greater because their interaction with social media is significantly more it's just that they just interact with social media at a greater speed, and they take in a lot more information as well. Whereas the millennials are kind of like chilling. We're like, we don't want to get too involved in the social media. But I feel like this is also where neuromarketing will be essential over time. So push a little bit on the Gen Zs, if anything.
Interesting. Wow, that's been very fruitful, insightful.
Glad.
Any shout out, parting words? Tell us a little bit more about your startup.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I'm, how do I say this? I'm a neuropsychologist by background.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been practicing as a clinician for the last year and a half since I've been in Dubai. And around 2 months ago, I decided to let go of the whole clinical career, became more part-time on that aspect, and I've been just like focusing on my startup.
Mm-hmm.
We're utilizing AI to bridge the gap in the market that we're seeing, where the demand for healthcare is so big, but the supply it's not that there's limited supply, it's just like there's the upper limit to the supply just because we have only limited amount of therapists coming in every year that are licensed to be able to give help. So we're providing them an AI mental health coach to provide more preventative strategies to their day-to-day stress. And the algorithm picks up that when you've become a bit more clinical or you are showing clinical signs, and it will redirect you to a therapist in the region then.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Well, in a nutshell, this is what I've been doing.
I think it feels like it's not automating or how do you call it? Replacing the role of a psychiatrist. It's just accelerating or making the services of a psychiatrist more accessible, I guess, to when there's a moment of need.
Exactly,
right?
accessible, but also to provide more preventative approaches. Like if you're having a lot of stress on a day-to-day, if you're not speaking to the right person or if you're not having constructive conversations around it, it will become very clinical at some point. There's always a tipping point, and this is associated to an individual's stress sensitivity. There's only so much stress you can handle before it becomes clinical. And this is where we want to help play a part in their stress sensitivity by reducing the sensitivity, by being able to actually get the help that they need immediately. We want to ease the access to health care and help rather than you waiting till worst case scenario and now you're actually going to therapy for long term, for not the wrong reasons, but you're going there because things have actually just gotten that bad. So this is where we want to help.
Right. And how are you able to identify this size of demand?
Having worked as a therapist, my wait list was 8 weeks long.
Right.
So I'm a junior therapist. So I can only imagine that for more senior therapists, it's longer. The waiting lists are longer. The price is huge. And I've just in my day-to-day conversations, I can see people are stressed. I can see people want help, and they just wish that it was easier to get the help. And I think it's also since COVID, the mental health issues have exacerbated over time. People really do feel the impact of COVID now through their emotional regulation, through social isolation. And I think everyone deserves a little bit of extra help. So.
Of course. And where can we find you? Where can our listeners and viewers follow you?
mindme.ae on Instagram, and then Nokhez Usama on LinkedIn. I'm very vocal on LinkedIn about what's going on and all the different features. We recently tested out a phone call option, which was a bit creepy because I was getting a call from MindMe and I'm like, oh my god, AI is calling me. So it's like we're at an interesting phase of testing everything out.
Interesting. Fantastic. Thank you, Nokhez. Thank you so much for coming to the show. Thank you.
I'm glad to be here. It was a great conversation.